We all have them, those blue bins for recycling. Bottles, cans, and plastic go in. What comes out is a mountain of material. But what happens to all of that stuff? You might be surprised to find out some of your recyclables are not being recycled. And that deposit you pay on bottles and cans, good luck getting that back. Fox 11 News In Depth starts right now. Hello, everyone. I'm Hal Eisner. Does this go into the blue bin? What about this can, or maybe this? It can all be very confusing, and it's all changing, especially now that China is no longer accepting our trash. So let's take a look back at recycling now and then. It all seemed so easy back in the 80s when California passed the bottle bill, charged a few cents for every bottle and can purchased to encourage people to bring them back and get that money. And indeed, California has long had one of the highest recycling compliance rates, thanks to that plan. But decades later, things are no longer easy or effective. Instead, recycling has become problematic, inconvenient, and expensive. And that 5 or 10 cents you pay for the California redemption value, you may not even have much luck getting that back.
Do you know if I can redeem these bottles here?
No, ma'am.
No?
No.
In the past 5 years, about 30% of California's recycling centers have closed down, unable to make money off of products that are rapidly losing their inherent value. Supermarkets are supposed to pick up the slack, taking back bottles and cans, but many times they just say no, willing to pay a fine rather than develop a program to deal with all those empties. So the consumer pays the price.
So we are looking at a system where the recycling centers are shutting their doors, the grocery stores are refusing to take the empties and give back the deposits that you paid.
But that's just the tip of a big glass, plastic, and paper iceberg. Recycling in general has a bigger problem, and you might call it the Great Wall of China. That is, the wall China has thrown up against U.S. recyclables. For years, the U.S. sent bales of mixed paper and plastic overseas to China, feeding a market hungry for raw materials. But now, China has plenty of its own. And the U.S. single-stream recycling, where consumers toss everything into the same bin, results in recyclables too contaminated for China to use.
When they open up these bales when they get there is that they see a lot of garbage, and that's what they're saying, no thank you, we don't want any more of your garbage.
Researchers say those dirty plastic materials have just been getting dumped by China and other countries, creating much of that Pacific Ocean garbage patch filled with trash that will likely be there for centuries. But if China won't take our discards anymore, where will they go? That's the problem that currently dogs recycling centers, who are faced with putting those mixed recyclables, right back into the landfills.
Recycling companies that serve those cities are working very hard to find new homes for this material.
But that means instead of recycling centers making money off of recycling, now they and the customer are having to pay someone else to get rid of it.
Our recycling program is in the red right now. We're upside down right now. It's costing us to actually recycle right now, where we were at a break-even point.
But experts in the field say don't despair. Look at this situation as an opportunity to remedy the trash issue by eliminating waste and boosting reusability, rather than just shipping the problem overseas and wishing it away. Today we'll cover the whole subject of recycling, including what to put in your blue bins and what to leave out. But first, I talked to State Senator Ben Allen in Sacramento. He represents Hollywood, the West Side, and the South Bay, and he's proposing new legislation that would give recycling a sweeping overhaul. The first thing I want to know from you is, what is your sense of recycling now? It feels like we need to recycle recycling.
Yes, well, that's why we're doing this effort. I mean, the fact is that most Californians are dutifully putting all these purportedly recyclable materials into their blue bins, and the sad truth is that they would be shocked if they knew how much of that material is not actually getting recycled at the end of the day.
You have a Senate bill here, Senate Bill 54, that you're co-sponsoring. What does this bill do?
So our bill basically says to the Cal Recycle department, so the department that oversees waste management and recycling, it says, look, move us toward a path where we're going to have a 75% reduction in single-use plastic waste by 2030. And so that means push our industry, push the market toward recyclability, toward reusability, toward compostability. and create a regulatory scheme that will help us to get there. And so basically it does for waste management and recycling what SB 32 and AB 32 did for climate change and greenhouse gas emissions reduction and pollution reduction. So it's basically empowers the government to lead us to kind of nudge the market so as to be able to move the market in the direction of more sustainable packaging. The great thing is we know that this is very possible. There already is a lot of sustainable packaging on the market, but it just needs a little bit of a nudge, a little bit of a push to get the kind of supports that it needs. And as part of that, we're also going to be trying to increase recycled content standards so that more and more of the materials that we buy in our plastics will actually come from recycled material.
When we talk about single-use items, we're talking about a water bottle, we're talking about a small can of tuna fish, single cans, single products. Is that what you're talking about, single use?
All we're trying to say is if it's going to be single use, we want to make sure that it's going to be recyclable or reusable or compostable. In the case of the water bottle, for example, if those water bottles actually make their way back into the recycling system, they're actually highly recyclable. Those are kind of plastic number one. So those actually are highly recyclable. We just need to make sure we have an infrastructure in place to collect those bottles, to make sure they're getting recycled and then turned back in to plastics through the recycling process.
There's been this concern about these things that should be going to be specifically treated as recyclables ending up in our landfills.
Well, it's because there's a lot of plastic out there that is technically recyclable under perfect conditions, but in the end of the day, it just doesn't pencil out. Sometimes it's because the recycling gets a little messy or gets dirty. Food gets on it, on the plastic, and just the cost associated with sorting that out and then cleaning it on a mass scale becomes so high that it can't compete with virgin plastic in that same area. So that's one problem. The other problem is you get things like your newspaper may sometimes come in a film, like it's a very thin plastic bag. Well, that is technically recyclable, but it's not the kind of thing that's really worth recycling if you look at the price differentials. And the other thing is that film is oftentimes thrown into the recycling bin and it gets caught up with the paper, and it actually gets stuck between the newspapers. And that actually ends up contaminating the quality of the paper from a recycling perspective.
Wasn't that one of the issues with regard to China, that we were sending over contaminated materials?
Yep. 100%, 100%. They were saying, hey, you know what, this is just not worth it anymore. It used to be, this is crazy, but it used to be that these bales of our junk would show up in port cities up rivers, up and down China. And villagers would come out and be given bales of American junk, and their families would sit there and basically sort through the garbage. But it got to a point where that just wasn't a sustainable model anymore. A lot of the garbage was just getting thrown into the river, and so they don't want our junk anymore, and that's really destroyed the kind of model that had been built in terms of recycling.
Senator Allen's legislation is expected to get a final vote in September. Still ahead, some of the things you put in your recycling bin may not belong there. We'll find out what's recyclable and what's not coming up. We're talking about recycling today, and all that stuff you put in your blue bins ends up at recycling centers. Recently, I talked with RIEL Johnson at Athens Services in Sun Valley. He shows us how high-tech the recycling business has become. His job title says it all.
Director of Resource Recovery.
What is that?
So we're looking at trash as a resource, and we're trying to recover as many resources as we can. So my job is to figure out how to do that. That's a Max AI unit, which is a robotic unit, actually using artificial intelligence. It's got millions of images stored in it. As material goes by it, a light source and camera again look at the source of material going by, makes a decision whether it should sort it or not. If it does sort it off, it then makes another decision on which location to place that material, and then it gets further processed into new material. It could look for a neck of a bottle and identify, just like you would make a decision. When you look at something, you might say, that's a PET bottle or that's an aluminum can, but based on its shape. So it's actually taking shape and characteristics and making a decision. We have optical sorting equipment that actually looks down at the waste with a light source Camera looking for a reflective signature. When it sees that reflective signature, a computer tells an air burst to blow that material off the line, and then it goes to a quality control station where we then recycle it into new products. This is an eddy current separator, and it is designed to repel aluminum. It's got a drum of rare earth spinning at a high rate of speed. It repels the aluminum as it goes by and ejects it to a quality control station. Aluminum is very valuable. Raw earth aluminum, as it comes out as an ore, takes a tremendous amount of energy to make it into actual aluminum. And to smelt aluminum back into aluminum is very efficient and uses a fraction of the energy as it would.
Marty! You've got to come back with me. Where? Back to the future.
Well, remember Back to the Future? One thing in the movie may not be that far off. Doc pulls banana peels and other garbage from the trash can and uses it to fuel his DeLorean time machine. The people at Athens Recycling actually tell me the researchers are making progress on turning Back to the Future into a reality today. And you know what? The idea of throwing a can or some plastic that was actually fossil fuel based may not be such a bad idea. Joining us now, Jamie Court, president of the public interest group Consumer Watchdog. Kim Braun is the environmental manager for Culver City, and Kobe Sky is an assistant director of the LA County Department of Public Works. Are we going to get those kind of cars? What do you think?
I sure hope so.
You hope so?
We are going back to the future.
Well, I hear we're close. I hear we're close. And Jamie, you know, I know that you're very involved in things that are affecting the consumer. I know all of you are very interested in how consumers use recycling, and I think a lot of us honestly are confused, me included. And so what we've decided to do here is I have 3 boxes right in front of us, kind of a game show all of a sudden, okay? And this has trash that we pulled out, like this thing right here. And we want to know whether you think that this is a recycled item or trash. Because a lot of people at home just automatically think if it's paper or something, it must be recycled. If it's a can or a bottle, it must be recycled, but not necessarily the case. What about that? That's styrofoam. Jamie, what do you say?
Well, that's not going to be recyclable because it's something that can't break down. So.
Okay, let's put that in there. What about this pizza box? You'd think it's recyclable, right? But look inside. It's still got stuff in it, right? Still got stuff there, and grease. And so what do you think, Kobe?
So the cardboard would normally be recyclable. The problem is when you've got that grease, that becomes a contaminant. It means that other things, not just that cardboard pizza box, but paper that comes up in contact with it will also be contaminated, and it'll ruin more than just that box.
And that's one of the reasons that's one of the reasons why China didn't want to take our stuff anymore, because we don't necessarily handle it right. We contaminate it before we send it off to where it needs to be done. Exactly. We'll throw it over here into this segment here. Cardboard?
It's recyclable.
Recyclable. We got one there. What about this? You got 2 different kinds of bags. These come from Amazon. This one is plastic, and this one is paper with some plastic inside. What say you?
So the film plastic, difficult to recover in a traditional recycling facility like you saw. That's the white one.
Okay.
This is actually what we call a hybrid, and you've got paper and plastic mixed together. It is very difficult for current recycling technology to separate the paper from the plastic and recover anything. So generally, those Amazon containers are not going to be recyclable.
Not recyclable for that. Recyclable for this?
Not recyclable.
No. Not recyclable. There you go. Okay, this is kind of interesting here. This is a bag that had food in it. Look at the inside.
Yeah.
So what happens to this? Do we call this recyclable or non-recyclable?
Well, the food will contaminate the rest of the product, so we would say not recyclable.
And the real problem with this is if you have a bottle that breaks and shards because you got a hauler taking it away, and it goes and the food gets in that, the whole load of your whole blue can could go away. So it's not just that someone's not recycling that bag, it's that about 25% of what we throw in those blue bins don't get recyclable because of contamination from food.
So this goes here.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. We got a lot in here, by the way, but look at this one. This is peanut butter, no stir crunchy style. Inside, kind of clean, not clean.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I would recycle that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You would recycle this.
Yes.
So we didn't do too well. We have 2 items in there.
Yeah.
In other words, what's the moral of the story?
The key is to try to reduce the contamination that you're putting in. And our messaging at LA County is really focused on clean, dry, and place it in the bin. If you can, for example, take a yogurt container or a soda bottle, clean it out first, dry it out, and then put it clean into the recycling bin. That's going to help the recycling system to be a lot more effective.
However, we have raised the point that recycling is not so good these days. And so we have to recycle the recycling industry. Should we just stop doing this stuff, Kim?
Absolutely not. I see hope in our recycling crises at this point in time. It's forcing us to develop an infrastructure within our own states and across North America, which eventually 5 or 10 years from now will be able to make us more sustainable and non-dependent on other countries trying to take our
So
materials.
we've rehearsed well. Now things aren't the way we want them to be. And if we keep doing the exercise over and over again, when things get better, assuming they get better, we'll know to continue to do it the way we've been doing it. Jamie, I'm going to come back to you in the next segment. Still ahead, the whole controversy over deposits and bottles and cans, and why grocery stores and some recycling centers are unwilling to pay up. We'll be right back. All those bottles and cans you buy, you're paying a deposit that you're supposed to get back if you return the bottles for recycling. But very few stores honor that anymore, and a lot of recycling centers have closed or they don't have the money to pay. For consumers, that deposit adds up to 5 cents for every bottle or a can under 24 ounces, and 10 cents for each large container over 24 ounces. Jamie Court of Consumer Watchdog, that's a problem.
It is. I mean, you know, we did a study, found out about a $1.5 billion we're forking over in dimes and nickels, but we're getting about half of it back. About a little bit more than a half. And the problem is that grocery stores are supposed to be the provider of last resort. They are not taking back the empties. The recycling centers, 40% have closed in recent years. And the state, Cal Recycle, which Senator Allen is charged with implementation of his bill, hasn't really managed this well. They've got a big reserve fund of over $300 million that they could pay to keep these closing recycling centers open. They're not tapping it. They tend to favor the waste haulers, the curbside haulers. Those guys get our redemption when we throw it in the blue bin, assuming it's not contaminated or broken. And so consumers are losing. It's becoming more of a tax than a deposit. We think this is really a call to go to do what works in the rest of the world, like Europe, where we have the grocers taking back everything in modern reverse recycling machines. It's cleaner, it's safer, and you get your money back.
Now, we've talked to a representative from Cal Recycling. We brought up some of the points that you have raised in recent news conferences, and here's what they said. They said recycling centers are private, and they can close if they're not profitable. The reserve money is actually budgeted funding for the upcoming quarter. That's the way they put that. And stores that don't pay deposits are warned and cited for violations. There have been more than 1,300 citations that have been written over the last 5 years. So they don't agree with you.
Well, look, we went to 50 stores, and they're on our website, and you can look at the videotapes. 2/3 of them, when they're supposed to on Cal Recycle's list, didn't take back bottles and cans, even when they had a sign in the window saying they were supposed to. Cal Recycle's not following the law. In terms of the money, they do free up money for these centers. They just don't give them enough, and it's not a long-term fix. The long-term fix is trying to change the law so this all works better. But in the meantime, the bargain we had was we'd have these recycling centers so that the grocers didn't have to do everything. When half of those recycling centers closed, and the last one just west of the 405 in Santa Monica closed just last month. So there's no place west of the 405 for hundreds of thousands of people to go. They don't recycle, they won't recycle, and curbside is an imperfect system. But most importantly, if you put a bottle and can at curbside, you don't get the redemption back. So I think this is a wake-up call for the governor to look at what works in Europe and other countries and to say, hey, grocers everywhere, if you're of big enough size, take back the bottles and cans, invest in those reverse recycling machines. We'll incentivize the payments. But Cal Recycle, unfortunately, is an agency that cannot and will not do it because it's mired in the same kind of problem in Sacramento that's kept the system where it is, which is The waste haulers control the system because they're politically powerful. They want to go curbside even with the contamination and rake in the dough. The grocers and the beverage companies, the soda companies that are supposed to handle this, as they do in the rest of the world, don't want to change the system and take responsibility for recycling the scrap. If we did that, it would be a better system, but it's a huge political lift in Sacramento. It's going to be up to the governor to do.
Kobe, how does the county look at that?
So there's one thing Jamie points out that's really important, which is that we have to make it easy and convenient for our residents to recycle. And a lot of people count on being able to get that rebate, that CRV value back as part of their income stream. So we're seeing that 40% of our recycling centers closing. It's going to be a really big issue for them to be able to bring back those recyclables. Curbside is definitely convenient for many people, but we need more recycling centers.
Kim, why don't you pick up on that? Because the recycling centers is what you deal with in Culver City.
Correct. We do have a buyback center in Culver City, and it's pretty popular. So if we could produce more of those in different areas, at least on the west side of Los Angeles, it would give people the opportunity.
So what are the three of you, we only have a few seconds left, 5 seconds. What needs to be done?
Look, we need to overhaul top to bottom. We need to get away from curbside. We need to get grocers to take responsibility for the cans. And the companies that make the products, the soda companies, they've got to treat the product as the product and the recyclable wrapper as the wrapper. And they got to be responsible for recycling the wrapper. If we incentivize it, it'll work well. It works all across the world that way. We just got to have the political power to do that.
And so you two would agree that we have to recycle recycling? Is that basically the bottom line?
I would add to that, producer responsibility and manufacturer responsibility is very important. Senate Bill 54 moves us in that direction. We need a lot more.
And that's Senator Allen's we talked to earlier. Final thought.
Yes, I just think education and outreach and trying to get the consumer to purchase properly will help us in recycling.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate your being here. Remember, try not to contaminate those recycled items. Wash them out, clean them out, dry them out. Still ahead, we're not done. I'll tell you about some new podcasts we want to share with you. That'll be coming up. Got an important episode of What the How for you. This one about hardening your home, protecting your home from wildfires now that we're in wildfire season. You can download that from whatthehowpodcast.com or any of the other places where you get podcasts. And we hope you got some good information, good tips about recycling here on this program today. What's recyclable and what's not. See you next time, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of you.